Hello, Mr. Skeleton Man here. We're going to use C# Crash Course number 3. Today's video is going to be a little different today. I'm going to give you two problems that I want you to try and figure out, and then I'm going to show you and explain how to code it up. Sounds simple enough, right? Well, we'll see about that. So for the first problem, I'm going to give you a collection of integers, and I'd like you to try and figure out which one of the integers are even. Here's some quick tips, and in fact, here's an idea for you that might help you out a little bit. Remember, or try to remember, that a collection is a box with boxes in them, and each of those boxes holds some data, in this case an integer. We will want to loop through the collection that is given, and then we want to check that each index of the array or the collection is even or odd, and if it is even, then we want to add even to the final result, or odd, depending on whatever you find out. And lastly, I wanted to note that I didn't go over this particular arithmetic in the previous two episodes just because I wanted to try and challenge you, but you'll want to use the modulus operator to try and figure this out. It'll make it a hell of a lot easier if you use it to try and figure out if your integer is even or odd. So that's pretty much it. Go ahead, pause the video, and try it out. So first off, since we need to update our parameters to be an array of integers, this HTTP get has to be updated to HTTP post. I won't go over why that is. When I create a playlist for APIs, I will. And then we'll also want to specify the return type to be a string array. Next, we can get rid of this since we don't need it anymore, and let's create the final results variable. We will want this to be an array of strings, and for simplicity, let's make it the length of the incoming collection. We can also get rid of this stuff here down below. And for this, we are going to want to use a for loop since we know how long we want to loop for. We can set the variable to 0, and then we want to say, or want to stop once the variable is greater than or equal to the array length. And here is where we're going to want to use the modulus operator. Modulus is another arithmetic tool, like I mentioned before, that we can use basically whenever you want to figure out the remainder of an integer divided by an integer. So in this example, since we want to figure out whether the current integer is even or odd, if you do the integer modulus 2, you're saying the remainder of that integer divided by 2 equals, and then whatever it should equal. In this case, we're going to do integer array, indexing into int array. And then we're going to do modulus 2. And if that equals 0, meaning there's no remainder, then it's even. And what we want to do for that is at the current index of the final results array, we are just going to add even. Don't forget it's a string, so we're going to use double quotes. And then otherwise, if it doesn't equal 0, then we're just going to add odd. Once we're done with this, all we have to do is return it, and we should be good to go. Let's see. So we're going to include a few integers, mix and match so that we can get a mixed results of evens and odds. Execute it, and there you go. Mixed results of evens and odds, and they look correct. Cool. So I want to show you another quick way that we can write this if statement. It's called the ternary notation, and it's usually used for super simple if statements like the one that we have here. Firstly, we're going to want to remove the old stuff that we had, and we're still going to want to insert into the final results array. And then here is where we're going to want to put that original if statement that we had, where we're checking if the integer is even or odd. Now we're going to want to use a question mark to signal that it is a ternary statement. And when we use anything after this question mark, means that in the scenario where that if statement is true, we're going to use whatever's behind the question mark. And then we want to use a colon to signal if that if statement is false, then we're going to use whatever's behind the colon. It's pretty simple. Usually condenses a lot of code. Like you saw, we used to have, I don't know, like 7 or 8 different lines. Now we only have 3. It makes it really easy to kind of read code as you're going along. So I hope you enjoyed that. Here's the next question you're going to have to solve. So this next question is going to be a little bit tougher and will require a little more thinking and some math, but I'm sure you can do it. With the next problem, I will still give you a collection of integers, but this time I want you to try and figure out which ones are prime numbers. Just remember that prime numbers are any numbers that are only divisible by 1 or itself. So with that, good luck, and you can pause the video here and I'll explain it afterwards. So luckily for us, most of what we have can be reused for the new problem. First, let's start by removing this ternary, and then let's create 2 new variables that we're going to need. First one is going to be the number that we are currently on in the collection that was given. The next is going to be a Boolean that decides whether or not the current number is prime. And next we're going to need another for loop. One thing to note is we can't use the same variable name as the first loop. It affects the scope of the code, which we'll talk about later on once we're a little more in depth with C#. And this time, rather than starting with 0, we're going to start with 2. Since we will be using k as the modulus, you can't use 0 because you can't divide by 0. And you can't use 1 because every whole number is divisible by 1, making it an unneeded step. By starting with 2, we can tell immediately if the number is prime or not. And then next, we will want to keep going and incrementing k until k is greater than or equal to the number we are checking. So for the actual if statement, it's going to be similar to what we did before, where we would want to do num modulus k equals 0. And if this is true, then we want to make sure is prime equals false. And lastly, another simple if statement is just going to check the is prime boolean, and that's going to insert into the final results array. So if is prime is true, then we are going to insert is prime. Otherwise, we are going to do not prime. And I'm also doing the ternary notation again, just to give another example of how to use it. But that's pretty much it for this one. Hopefully it wasn't too hard for you. Well, I think that's it for this episode. Hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you thought. If my videos are helping at all or they're improving, just let me know. Anyways, I'm going to leave you with the final results of problem 2. So see ya.